Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. Have we got anybody else in the waiting room at all?
Just one more person joining, and then we are ready.
Brilliant. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining this talk on the Big City Butterflies project achievements. I'm Steve Bolton, Conservation Officer, and I'm joined by Emma Bickford, our Engagement Officer. So really excited to share what we've been up to for the last few years. Hopefully some of you might have been following on social media, but we've got some slides to sort of let you know what some of the achievements are and what the outcomes are. And then there'll be a chance for questions at the end. So I'll be sharing a few slides, and then Emma will be sharing some slides as well. But I thought we'd start actually. We've got a short little video, which is quite a nice way of if I can get to that, which is quite a nice way of just sort of setting the tone. It's only a sort of minute and a half, so I thought we'd give that a go. So have a watch of this.
So Big City Butterflies is a butterfly conservation project that's basically based around getting people in London really interested in their local green spaces and in conserving all the butterfly and moth species that we have in London. So it's a sort of community engagement project and a conservation project at the same time.
You think that London is quite a metropolitan area, but there's actually lots of animal, wildlife, insect, plant life. Get out there and enjoy and explore nature and learn about what's on our doorstep in London.
If people don't see butterflies, they won't care about butterflies, and if they don't care about butterflies, they won't save butterflies.
I think it's really important for local communities to engage in this type of conservation, because it seems like if you're not in the field or if you're not kind of conservationist by background, there's nothing you can do. But having walks with local people makes you understand that we all have our part to play.
I think a lot of people feel quite helpless, and a lot of young people have a lot of eco-anxiety at the moment. But there are things that you can do, and I think even just doing small things makes you feel a bit better.
So yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour. And yeah, some of our brilliant partners in that video that shared some of their thoughts and also some of the sites that we've worked on and helped improve. So as I said, I'm gonna start off with a few slides to cover a bit of an introduction of my role. Then I'll hand over to Emma. So a bit of a recap on the objectives of the project. To help Londoners discover and connect with butterflies, moths, and the green spaces that support them, to improve the quality and connectivity of green spaces, to increase their suitability for butterflies, moths, and other wildlife, to increase levels of recording and monitoring across London, to increase opportunities for BC to engage with new audiences, and to enable BC to develop and test new approaches to conservation in an urban context. So this is the project area, spread across 17 mainly inner London boroughs and divided up into also the colour coding with our butterfly conservation volunteer run branches, and they've been instrumental in supporting and helping us deliver this project work, and will continue some of that work once the project finishes. So yeah, it's quite a big area to cover and many different partners. So it's been brilliant that it is a 4-year Heritage Lottery funded project. So we've had a decent amount of time to get to know and build some trust with lots of different community groups that we've supported in delivering lots of engagement work across the area. So these are our main themes or sort of activity areas. So as a conservation officer, I've been focusing on the recording and monitoring side and the habitat management side. So that's what I'll be covering, and then Emma's focused more on the engagement side, and our previous officer, I should mention, Ellie as well, was delivering a lot of the engagement work, including school workshops. So this gives a snapshot of the kind of spread of different activities across the project area, across London. So that the blue markers are where we've given site advice visits. The red markers are where we've then gone on to directly support habitat improvements on a site. The green markers are where we've established new recording schemes, and then the yellow markers are different engagement events. So a pretty good spread and a sort of network, hopefully, that's been established across that area. So I was just going to start with a bit of an update from 2024 and some of the activities this year before I get into more of a summary. So one of my main roles for the recording and monitoring is doing the training workshops. So just some examples there, one at Bunhill Fields in the City of London. It was a fairly gloomy day, but the leader there in her pink shirt managed to attract a red admiral, which is always helpful, and came and landed on her shirt. Then the one below, Urban Growth Community Group, a really good kind of food growing group, community group working in Southwark, and particularly around Southwark Park and in some of the housing estates to improve some of the planting for wildlife in and amongst the housing estates, and working with local residents there. And so they came out for a bit of a sort of butterfly walk and identification recording session in Southwark Park, and we saw quite a few butterfly species, and the kids always love getting an up-close view if we manage to catch one or two and get them in a pot, and they can then release them. And it's that kind of work, particularly on the smaller, more urban sites, where we have set up, and it mentions there, 14 iRecord surveys, which is using the iRecord Butterflies app as a really easy tool to sort of learn to identify butterflies, and then record them as well on a monthly survey, for example, that can help build up a better understanding of what species are present on that site. So across this year, 2024, we've added more butterfly transects and now supporting 19 Big City Butterflies transect sites. And this year, that's included 425 transect walks and 9,476 butterflies recorded in that 1 year of 28 species. So that's really valuable data for us to begin to better understand what the population trends are. And that's what a butterfly transect allows you to do over time, to monitor those populations. And yeah, a really good example, Avery Hill Park, a fairly recent transect, but that certainly bucked the trend this year when there has been a general decline, particularly from last year, just because of the poor weather this year. So generally butterfly numbers are down this year compared to last year, but on this particular site, they've gone up by nearly 85%, which is quite significant. And there has been a bit more recording of the site, but generally that is a good indication that site is quite resilient and responding very well. And we have done some significant meadow improvements on that site as well. And you've got things like the green hair streak there, which is a habitat specialist species and fairly scarce. So it's great to see that one turning up, and that's a fairly new record for the site, I believe. So we have some fun doing moth recording events, and Emma's been delivering quite a few of these as well. So we sort of team up and cover more areas that way. But this particular one was at Abney Park Cemetery in Hackney, and a really popular day. I think it was definitely over 20 people turned out to that. And we've now provided the Friends group there with a moth trap so they can continue doing some regular recording on that site. And this year we've been collating a lot of the data, particularly from last year's moth trapping. We had some really successful sites and collected those records. You can see 149 species, and the rough average was about 40 moths on each survey of 18 different species, with Valentine's Park in Redbridge being one of the highest, with 44 species on the 17th of July. And over the course of think it was 5 surveys at that particular site, which we supported the local kind of ranger team and the park managers in Redbridge there. Having 94 species over those surveys is a pretty decent number of species for that park, and great to feed that back to the park managers and support the work they're doing, both with they're keen on both having natural habitats and sort of wilder areas for wildlife, but also the planting and the kind of horticultural areas as well. So just thinking overall then in terms of the recording and monitoring outcomes over the life of the project, nearly getting on for 4 years. We've done 68 workshops, training workshops in total, with 742 people trained. And that's helped establish this variety of 53 new recording schemes, 20 transects, which I mentioned, 19 iRecord app surveys on different sites, and 14 moth recording sites as well. So yeah, we've got those kind of outcomes in terms of increasing skills and knowledge of all those people that we've trained, and particularly with the new regular volunteers that have started recording. And over the life of the project, we've been gathering feedback and evaluation. So we've been improving our activities as we've gone on, and also to highlight the outcomes to our project funders. So you've got some of these sort of quotes coming in, which are great to see, to really understand the impact. So as you can see there, it's opened my eyes to a whole new love of butterflies. I spend lots of time photographing them, learning to identify and recording on iRecord. It's a new passion. So that's great to see. And you can see the spread, the green markers there of the new recording schemes across London. Yeah, one of those that we helped set up was at Wormwood Scrubs, which is a fantastic site in West London. As the name suggests, it's got plenty of kind of scrub, which is a fairly rare habitat in London, and lots of tall grassland, and a brilliant site for skippers. So skipper butterflies. So in the last year, in this year, 2024, on the Transect, which is this weekly walk you do through spring and summer, they recorded 500 skipper butterflies in this one season, which is a pretty high number, and I think one of the highest sort of in the county, in the area of Middlesex. So yeah, some of the other outcomes with that kind of data collation, if you like, and that's really helping to establish a recording community, and bringing that data together and sharing it with all the recorders. They can see kind of and compare sites and can see what's happening on other nearby sites, and allows us to kind of look at it in a more holistic way. So those 19 iRecord butterfly survey sites that I mentioned have generated 1,191 records of 22 butterfly species, and all that data is freely available on the iRecord website, and is also freely available to GIGL as well, the London Record Centre. So it's all useful data. 14 moth survey sites, so 917 records and over 150 species. So again, that data is either on iRecord or shared with county recorders, so it's available. And the 20 butterfly transect sites, so brilliant to have over 20,000 new butterfly records over the life of the project, with 28 species and over 700 transect walks, which translates to quite a lot of volunteer hours put into the project, which is brilliant. So yeah, it's allowed us to get better data, because there's reasonably good data for Greater London, actually, or Outer London, I should say, but not as much data on Inner London. So improving that situation will contribute to a better understanding of how butterflies and moths are faring in Inner London, and that can inform conservation work, both work that Butterfly Conservation might do, but also our partners as well. And as I mentioned, that a lot of that data is can be shared with our partners like the London boroughs, but also the London Record Centre, GIGL, and it will inform site and landscape management plans of the different partners and the boroughs. So they've got that evidence of what species are present and where you've got transects, what the population trend is kind of doing. And it'll also inform our own butterfly conservation in a London landscape plan, which is a sort of long-term landscape plan and allows us to be a bit more strategic in supporting our partners in a London. It will inform Greater London Authority and borough biodiversity plans and local nature recovery strategy plans as well, I should say. Again, it's that evidence base of understanding what's where and how you might target your biodiversity work. We've also been able to do some analysis, some really interesting analysis, but and particularly the longer term analysis did focus on the Greater London area because that's where currently we've got the best data, but I was really interested to see those longer term trends. For example, ideally you need sort of 20 years worth of data to get confidence in those trends, but yeah, really pleasing to see that there is a positive abundance and distribution trend for 22 wider countryside species in Greater London, which is illustrated in this graph here. So yeah, it's the abundance of those species over that time period has increased by 14%. And the distribution as well, which is a slightly different measure of what species are where, has increased by 16% over that time period. So that's shown in this graph in terms of a log of abundance going from the year 2000, as I mentioned, up to 2022, with that trend line of an increase. So that's encouraging to see, specifically for those wider countryside species where, yeah, there are ups and downs. There are some species that aren't doing so well, but generally there is this increase in abundance, and those sites hopefully are being managed more sensitively in that time period, and we're seeing this increase in abundance. So moving on now to habitat management activities, and again, just having a quick look at this past year, at some different sites where we've been working, and particularly meadow creation projects. So these top two pictures are Clapham Common. So continuing a really good partnership there with the Friends group, who've been brilliant at raising funds and doing more and more meadow creation with the method that we originally designed together, where we've been stripping back topsoil, exposing the subsoil, which is much better for seeding into and establishing much longer term species rich meadow habitat that needs a lot less maintenance than trying to do it on topsoil. And yeah, I think that's probably the fourth quite big site we've done on Clapham Common. So that's good to see. And quite big scale as well, you know, with machinery and getting diggers in, but you don't have to do it at that scale. So bottom left there is Bishop's Park in Hammersmith, where some Friends group were really keen to utilise. This was a circular kind of marked out area, but there was just amenity grass. There was nothing there and no interest for biodiversity or wildlife. And so that's where they decided to strip the turf back themselves and seed with some meadow mix that we provided. And that was only just done this year, but we'd already had some cornfield annuals in that mix, like the poppies you can see there and marigolds, that already flowering, and then act as a bit of a nursery crop for the perennials, like Beresford trefoil, for example, that's going to establish thereafter. Then actually that's another Hammersmith site, which I've got here, Ilbrook Common, where we supported these few different sites show, yeah, some wildflower planting. So Ilbrook Common is a site where Hammersmith were doing a reasonable size restoration project, and we provided some advice and provided some nectar plants there. Hempagrimony, which supports quite a lot of different butterfly species, and then some sort of semi-shade tolerant plants like primrose and dog violet, which will hopefully do well on that site and part of a bigger planting scheme. Fred Wells Garden in Wandsworth, just an example of kind of the horticultural and these sort of urban planting that we support, and with shrubs like hebe as a good nectar source, and that particular site had thyme and red valerian as well. Then brilliant fun project in Beckton Park in Newham, with a brand new butterfly garden, and we worked with some garden and landscape designers there to come up with this scheme of circular beds that you can walk through in between, and a really good variety of planting went in there that we supported, which had sort of a bit of horticultural planting like Verbena bonariensis, for example, was a good example of a kind of drought tolerant plant that's quite sustainable, but mixing that in with some native food plants, for example, like Bird's-foot trefoil, the food plant of the common blue butterfly, and lots of different moths as well, a good nectar source, so real good mixture of planting. And also actually to introduce, you can just about see in the middle, come back. There's some native shrub planting in the middle of some of those beds, so things like hawthorn and blackthorn, which will help provide shelter for butterflies and other species, and also additional food sources as well. I think that's quite an important addition, which is often missed out, to provide that shelter. So we've done tree and shrub planting as well. Example from Springfield Park in Hackney. And again, this is on that theme of shelter and providing shelter. Very often in urban parks, you might have longer grass or meadow areas and mature trees, but very seldom have native shrubs. So hawthorn, blackthorn, buckthorn, which are all really important butterfly and moth food plants, both food plants and nectar sources, and good for wildlife generally, of course, with berries and that sort of thing. And so in some areas we can enhance grassland with these small shrub blocks, and they don't impact on the overall openness. You plant them in reasonably small blocks, but I think they're going to be really, really valuable for urban habitats. At Beckenham Place Park in Lewisham, disease-resistant elm planting. Many of the elms, they do have native elms there, but many of them are diseased and dying back. So to really replace some of those with disease-resistant elms that we know are going to survive and mature, and help support white-letter hair streak butterfly. And another example there, this is up on Crab Hill at Beckenham Place Park with some more shrub blocks. Again, a similar species mix to provide more shelter. It's very, very open and sort of windswept, and not much shelter at all on that site, so that should help. Brilliant to work with the Hackney Buzzline project, which some of you may have heard about, but they've got some funding to kind of create this buzzline, which links a number of different parks and housing estates in Hackney. Daubney Fields is kind of one end, and Hackney Downs Park, I think, is the other. So they're working with the park managers, and they've got a gardening member of the team that works with lots of community groups and housing estates to sort of improve habitats and engage and sort of educate people along this new buzzline. So a really great community project. And the example there actually is Millfields Park, and the council there rotivated these great big long strips along a cycleway, a sort of a connecting corridor, and you can see in that first year. So this seems a long time ago. This was spring this year, and it's already, because we had some cornfield annuals in the mix. We've got those flowering in this first year, and then the slower growing perennials should develop into more of a mix in the following years. And you can see from the quote there, so Jerry is main project lead, I suppose, for Hackney Buzzline, working with EcoActive. And his quote there just sort of illustrates how valuable our support has been to really provide some expert advice, both in terms of the habitat and the monitoring of butterflies, to sort of discuss that in detail, because he's saying there the council really don't have that level of expertise. So we've been able to come in and give that advice and really help support get that project off the ground, which is great. And yeah, you can see myself there with some kids. So yeah, these nice long rotating strips that you can see were all seeded by local school children. So that was great fun trying to keep them in a line to sow seed, and then we had a row of stompers behind treading the seed in. So that was quite a fun morning. So in terms of some of the outcomes of habitat management, you can see there 100 different site visits, and then the red markers show all the sites where we've been working in partnership with community groups and councils, working on housing estates, on community gardens. We've improved 77 sites, which is brilliant to sort of transform and improve all kinds of different sites, to going back to our objectives to help improve the habitat quality of kind of existing sites, but also help to connect sites and the kind of community gardens and housing estates. You know, the smaller urban spaces are a great example of that. So yeah, over the life of the project then, we're up to over 27,000 square meters of meadow created or improved. And yeah, we've done quite a few of these kind of meadow scrapes, if you like, where you remove that nutrient-rich topsoil layer and seed into the poorer subsoil, and you can really support a much richer meadow habitat by doing that method. A sort of a smaller feature area, if you like, but it brings that seed source onto the site. And if the council or landowners then manage, for example, with cut and collect in the surrounding amenity areas, you can begin to sort of improve those as well, and you've got a ready-made seed source there to sort of seed into the wider areas. Yes, lots of tree and shrub planting that you can see there in the numbers, and the picture there is Blythe Hill Fields, which was a community-led planting scheme that we supported, which provided a new woodland zone, which was great to do, with oaks and elms and hawthorn, blackthorn, buckthorn, and some woodland kind of flower planting as well. Then lots of flower pots and plugs on all kinds of different sites. That example is from Robin Hood Community Garden in Hackney near Springfield Park. And that was already a brilliant sort of sheltered site, had lots of butterflies, had more butterflies in this little community garden than it did in the rest of Springfield Park, actually. But again, they wanted to do more and have more variety of planting there, which we supported them with. So yeah, that's bird's foot trefoil you can see there. So in terms of some of the outcomes of habitat management, we've helped improve 30 management plans and set up agreements, particularly where we've supported habitat improvements, and that's going to should help butterflies and moths in the long term. We've delivered 21 habitat management and/or wild spaces training workshops to over 200 people. And yes, and these are some of the kind of community garden spaces within housing estates, for example. So yeah, the Rockingham Estate in Southwark had already established a brilliant community garden there, and we just came in and gave some additional advice to sort of diversify and for example, target a bit more food planting for butterflies and caterpillars to support breeding populations. And the Golden Lane Estate, so very central London site and in and around the Barbican, and they've got a fantastic little sort of wild corner. So we've been supporting them and doing engagement work with them, with all the residents there. And that, again, in terms of outcomes, improve skills and knowledge across all those people. So I've learned lots about caterpillar food plants and the importance of moths to pollination. I feel that while the general decline in numbers is depressing, we have the chance to make London a haven for butterflies and moths, which is brilliant, and exactly what we're kind of encouraging people to do, to get involved and to take action to support butterflies and moths and wildlife. Another bit of feedback here, and we've been working with an evaluation consultant to give us those statistics, if you like. So some of those feedback surveys indicate 81% of people are now more likely to take action to protect green spaces or nature. And yeah, it's made me plant differently, and I've now transformed a green space adjacent to my home. So yeah, I should mention the Wild Spaces workshops is linked with our UK-wide campaign, which encourages and supports members of the public to create wild spaces in their gardens or community spaces to support the whole butterfly life cycle in terms of feeding, breeding, and shelter. Yeah, so further kind of outcomes, if you like. So an example here, advice has helped partners to achieve biodiversity objectives and changing ways in which green spaces are managed. So the most useful aspects have been a contributor towards biodiversity net gain targets, general improvements to the park, and a fantastic project to engage the public with. Which I think has been one of the key successes, is to kind of combine that habitat advice work with engagement work to kind of engage with a wider audience and really bring people along and inspire people to get involved and do more to support wildlife, because every little helps. And yeah, the project support has acted as a catalyst for large habitat management improvements. So this particular quote refers to Avery Hill Park, the site you can see in the images there. So advice and support indicating how and where a new large wildflower meadow might be created, and funding the scarification and seeding of a 6-acre site at Avery Hill Park. The results are starting to look very successful, so we plan to double the size next year with funding from a council grant scheme. So we, a couple of years ago now, funded the scarification, which you can see there, the tractor, and we already knew this site could be improved in this way. It had been cut and collected for a few years by the council, and we knew that the coarse grasses weren't too dominant. We knew the nutrients weren't too high, and we could come in after a cut and collect to scarify and then seed with a meadow mix to kind of improve the species diversity. And you can see the image there on the bottom right. Hopefully you can pick that out, but it did take a couple of years to develop. And previously this site was fine grasses and yarrow and very few other wildflowers. But now in that image, there's at least 5, 6, 7 different wildflower species in that one little patch. So things like red clover, yellow rattle, oxeye daisy, birdsfoot trefoil, knapweeds. So that's great to see, and we know that that's an approach that can work if you choose the right site. And that group have now, as it says there, gone on and used that approach, used that method to do more habitat improvement of adjacent sort of amenity grass areas with a similar approach. So last slide now, just to think ahead in terms of our project's legacy and how we want to the project's impact to continue after the project formally finishes. So one of the keys there is the resources that we've developed and published. I wrote the Urban Habitat Management Guide, you can see on the top right there, which has a lot of best practice guidance. So it breaks down a lot of the habitat types and some fairly simple and easy to follow guidance, but crucially also sort of demonstrates and illustrates how those techniques and methods can be used on different sites in London with case studies, which I think is really useful to show people. There's also tables showing the kind of habitat requirements of different species of butterfly and a quick reference illustration showing a kind of mock-up of all the different features that you might ideally have in an urban park, which is quite a nice way of kind of illustrating literally what can be done. Bottom right there, we've got our recording leaflet, which we published a couple of years ago now, but a nice simple little leaflet guide with an identification guide of some of the common butterflies and details on the RRecord Butterflies app, and supporting and encouraging people to use the app and get out and record butterflies. So these guides have been sort of publicised and shared with our partners, and we're going to be making them available to download from our website and to purchase hard copies as well. So a quote there from one of our partners: they found the BC resources useful from the workshops and attended Friends AGM groups and done walkabouts with community groups interested in creating meadows, and we've used their resources for events to promote good practice. So yeah, we've established on most of those sites where we have helped and supported in habitat improvements, we've set up 10-year management agreements with those partners to kind of establish that commitment to help maintain and look after those habitats for the next 10 years and provided advice on maintenance. We're starting to develop our own bit of butterfly conservation in a London landscape plan, which really recognise a lot of the work we've been doing and that value in also combining conservation work with engagement work to reach a wider audience. But that will set out landscape scale actions focused on different priority species that we want to promote and target for our work, and that will be linked also to kind of people and partner objectives and opportunities across the area, and that's going to help inform other plans and strategies across London as well. And yeah, talking of London plans, we've been working with the Greater London Authority on their London local nature recovery plan, working quite closely with them on that, and we'll also be feeding into borough nature recovery plans. But the Greater London plan, we shared with them a lot of our data, the recording data, but also the habitat improvement data for areas that we've been working. We've also mapped out a lot of opportunity areas where we think areas could be improved in the future. Taking part in lots of different workshops on prioritising the different butterfly species and sort of targeting work, and also grouping them into habitat assemblages as well, for example. All these different recording schemes, so we want to ensure we've got a kind of ongoing support network, both through staff and volunteers that are going to help providing support and ensure those recording schemes can continue recording. And we really want to get some more long-term data, particularly from those transects. And Emma's going to talk more about our Big City Butterflies champions, so I'm sure they will be supporting in this kind of network as well. We've had some great kind of, now we're near the end of the project, some brilliant opportunities to share our successes and the lessons learned. We had our project conference couple of months ago at Waterlow Park, which is a great event with lots of partners and supporters and volunteers. So great to say thank you to some of those who have supported the project, and to have some of our partners share some of the work and successes they've been having, and share some of the resources that I've mentioned. We'll also be having a final evaluation report, which will help share some of the lessons learned and some of the impacts that we've had. And finally then, we've been working with some of our partners to investigate opportunities for future project funding in London. So some partners have very much appreciated the support and want to continue working with butterfly conservation, and are establishing their own projects, funded projects, for example, the new Nature in Towns and Cities lottery funding, to include us in delivery of future project work, in terms of both kind of engagement and the habitat side of things. So yeah, it'd be great to continue in that respect. Yeah, I hope that was interesting and informative for my side, the conservation side, and yeah, we will take questions at the end, once Emma's done her slide. So I'll stop sharing now and hand over to Emma.
Thanks very much, Steve. Right, I will just share my screen. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Emma. I'm the engagement officer on Big City Butterflies. I joined Butterfly Conservation in June this year, taking over the reins from my predecessor, Ellie. And I'll be just taking you through a bit of an engagement update of what we've been up to in our final year. So from an engagement perspective, our aims are to connect people with nature, to encourage people to care about and support butterflies and moths, and to engage diverse audiences. And we do that mainly through 3 different streams of work. The first being school workshops, community events, and high footfall events. So first, school workshops. So in our final year, I've delivered 23 school workshops, reaching over 600 children. We focused a lot in Hackney this year, because that had been identified from our data as a region to kind of focus on a bit more to make sure we get a good spread across London. And that gave us a great opportunity to work with Jerry from Hackney Buzzline, who Steve already mentioned. He was brilliant. He's been working with some of the schools in Hackney, working with their eco clubs, and doing some planting with them. And these photos here are from planting at Kingsmead School in Hackney. And we also ran a moth trap with Jerry at Mandeville School as well. So we do 2 workshops with each class. So workshop 1 is an introduction to butterflies and moths. We learn about their life cycles and caterpillar adaptations and defences. And also I take in live caterpillars and moths for the kids to see up close, because there really is no substitute for meeting a moth in person. And it really helps to break down some of the kind of misconceptions that the kids might have about moths. A lot of the time, people assume that all moths eat clothes, or they're all kind of drab and boring. And then you take in something like an elephant hawk moth and their minds are blown. Then workshop 2, we move on to butterfly and moth habitats. So we discuss the requirements at different stages of the life cycle, and we get outside and do some planting in the school grounds. I also attended the Urban Biodiversity exhibition at the London Academy of Excellence this year, which is a 6th form in Stratford. The event was actually organised by 2 of the 6th formers, which was very impressive, as part of their extended project qualification. And it was not only for other 6th formers, but also for years kind of 9 to 13, pupils from local schools. So there were various nature charities there, and it's a really important demographic for us to be engaging with, and had some really lovely conversations with the young people about the butterflies that you can see in London, and also about careers in conservation. So moving on to community events. This year we've delivered 16 community events, engaging 249 people. So this can include talks and workshops. I've included here a couple of photos from London Nature Day at the Natural History Museum, where I gave a talk this year, and also supporting events like Cody Doc's Moth Club in Newham. And the Moth Club's a really great example of how community engagement and recording can be really woven together. Another highlight from community events this year was a new partnership for Big City Butterflies, which was with Energy Garden. So Energy Garden's mission is to bring renewable solar energy to communities to combat the climate crisis. They also have community gardens based at several sites in London, and they're focused on environmental education and well-being. And we hosted a moth night with them. So we had a little moth trivia quiz, and we ran the moth trap. I took some lovely oak egg caterpillars from home to show them, some garden tiger moths as well. We looked at specimens under the microscope too. And it was really nice actually to see how excited people got about meeting the caterpillars. I think it takes people back to that kind of childlike wonder that a lot of us, remember from childhood, and that kind of innate connection to nature we have as kids. So this was also a really important age demographic. So the attendees were all in that kind of 18 to 30 age group that BC is really keen to engage with. So moving on to some more of the longer term partnerships that we've had throughout the project. First, Sustainably Muslim. So Sustainably Muslim is a community interest company that aims to inspire and empower Muslims to serve their environment and their community. And Nazia has been amazing as kind of acting as a bridge between butterfly conservation and the community that she's built. And I've shared a quote from Nazia here that praised how Big City Butterflies was able to dismantle barriers to engagement, and how much Sustainably Muslim appreciated the autonomy on what they wanted to deliver. So we very much co-create the workshops and events together. And these photos here are from our Paint, Pot and Plant workshop at Poplar Union. That was a really lovely event where Nazia and I both gave a talk, and then we sowed some wildflower seeds, nectar sources for butterflies and moths, as well as kind of caterpillar food plants like bird's foot trefoil, and decorated the pots. We also went on a nice butterfly walk at Walthamstow Wetlands, and there's a photo from that here. So another partnership that has continued this year has been Wild in the City. So Wild in the City supports people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds to feel comfortable and confident in natural spaces. So each year they've delivered Nature Connectors workshops. This year 3 sessions took place, taking the total for years 1 to 4 to 13 workshops. And the kind of activities that were included were, as in previous years, a mixture of kind of nature education, like this butterfly walk pictured here, bushcraft, and also having a kind of reflection space where people of colour can discuss the kind of barriers to nature connection, and also kind of reflecting on ancestral skills and heritage. And the focus of Nature Connectors is very much to increase knowledge and to develop leadership skills for people to pass on in their own communities. Roots and Shoots has also been a really important partnership for us throughout the project, and that's really continued this year. So Roots and Shoots is an education and environmental charity, they've got this really, really beautiful community garden near Lambeth. And we have a kind of wild spaces activity sheet that's a checklist where you take groups out and look for all the different features for butterflies and moths. And I did it with a group not long ago at Roots and Shoots Garden, and we ticked off every single feature. So they've been doing a fantastic job there. And one of the groups that meets weekly at Roots and Shoots is the Grounding Project. So the Grounding Project is a horticultural therapy group for asylum seekers and refugees, and that's in partnership with South London and Maudsley NHS Trust. So we co-created a series of workshops with the Grounding Project at Roots and Shoots. That started with my predecessor, Ellie, and I know that they had a really lovely visit to the Horniman Museum and saw lots of lovely tropical butterflies there. And then the kind of creative workshop started to build this really beautiful sculpture. So it's called A Kaleidoscope of Colour. And basically all the participants made these lovely copper butterflies. So I've got a couple of photos here of the kind of copper smithing. There was also enamelling and painting. And then that is installed in the Roots and Shoots garden. So it was a really lovely kind of creative outlet for the group, and kind of a really lovely celebration of the community that's been built there. The photo on the left is actually from the kind of celebration unveiling event, and that was really lovely. One of the participants wrote a poem about the benefit that the Roots and Shoots garden has for his mental health and well-being, and did a reading of that. And there was a lot of discussion about butterflies as symbols of hope and migration and resilience as well. Also at Roots and Shoots, I've delivered some workshops for SEN secondary school students that included a classroom session and also time outside. And also, meeting some caterpillars and some moths and doing some kind of craft activities as well. So that was really lovely. So I'm going to move on to the high footfall events. So our total for this year is 7 high footfall events, engaging over 600 people. So the first kind of highlight on here is Flourish Fest. This was just before I started. I know Steve went to this one and did some lovely mask making with local families. Mask making is always very popular. And then this one in the middle is making seed bonds with the company Seed Ball, and chatting to young people about the importance of providing nectar and a caterpillar food plants. And then this one on the right is from the Garden Museum. So this is our lovely volunteer Becky and we went to the Garden Museum's Neighbours Day, and we ran the moth trap. We encouraged people to take part in the big butterfly count, and had some craft activities as well. And that was really lovely because being a Neighbours Day, it was lots of local families, and being the Garden Museum, lots of people who are into their gardening. So lots of good chats about how to garden for butterflies, with butterflies in mind. Some more high footfall event highlights. We focused on Barking and Dagenham a lot this year because that was again sort of identified as an area for us to add some more focus on. And yeah, that was 2 really lovely events in Barking and Dagenham. That I featured here was the Bee and Butterfly Bonanza at Eastbrook End Country Park. That was with Butterfly Conservation, but also Bumblebee Conservation Trust and Bug Life. And that was a really great event. So I delivered a butterfly ID workshop. We ran the moth trap, got this lovely peppered moth, that classic example of evolution in action. We did some mask making, and we also did the big butterfly count with groups as well. Also here we've got One Borough Festival in Dagenham. So again, lots of mask making, and we took along this chalkboard and asked people to share what they love about butterflies and moths. And that sparked some really nice conversations about kind of what butterflies mean to people, nice memories that they had. And butterflies seem to be a real kind of symbol of joy for people and really uplifting. So it was a good chance to get people doing the big butterfly count. So that takes us over the kind of lifetime of the project to a grand total of 96 school workshops, 91 community events, and 24 high footfall events. So we've over-delivered on our targets, which is great. And that takes us to a total of over 12,000 people engaged over the lifetime of the project, which is amazing to see. We also try to incorporate wider butterfly conservation campaigns into all of the engagement work that we do. So we had big butterfly count events in Lewisham, Barking, Romford and Lambeth this year. The one in Lewisham was really lovely because that was at University Hospital Lewisham, where there is a wellbeing garden at the hospital in partnership with the RHS. So I went along, delivered a butterfly ID workshop for the RHS garden volunteers, and we carried out the big butterfly count with volunteers and with hospital staff. So that was a really nice event. The big butterfly count has sparked so many conversations this year, people all reporting seeing way fewer butterflies. So people definitely have been kind of taking notice, and that's been a good foundation to then talk about butterfly conservation's other kind of flagship campaign that Steve mentioned, Wild Spaces. So encouraging people to register their wild space on the website, whether it's a balcony or a garden or a community space that they visit, and try and make space for butterflies and moths. So as Steve mentioned, in October we had our Big City Butterflies Conference. So this was at Lauderdale House in Waterloo Park, and it was a really lovely day of bringing together lots of different partners, volunteers, members of the public, to just celebrate what's been achieved. So we had a mix of speakers from partners we've worked with, to some butterfly conservation experts, and we also had an afternoon of workshops. So we had 3 workshops going on in the afternoon. So Steve delivered his Wild Spaces workshop. Here we have Sidra from Sustainably Muslim delivering a nature journaling workshop. And we were really keen to try and include something creative, because research has shown that creativity can be a really important route for people to connect with nature. And that one proved really popular. And at the bottom here, we've got some photos of national micromoth expert, Dr. Phil Sterling, doing a brilliant Getting to Grips with Grubs Caterpillar ID workshop, which included going out for a nice wander in Waterloo Park, looking for these gorgeous little leaf miners. So I've shared some feedback we got from the conference. People really enjoyed the kind of diversity of speakers and topics, and the fact that we blended the kind of sciencey side of our work with the people-focused side. So it was a big success. So moving into evaluation, this is data from our most recent evaluation report. As Steve said, we're continuing to work with an external evaluator. So this is our most recent data, is that 81% of people are more likely to take action to protect or get involved with their local green spaces. People are feeling more connected to nature, with 76% agreeing they feel closer to nature and are more likely to visit green spaces again. People are learning new skills. So 100% enjoyed the activity, which is good. 99% learned something new, and 84% specifically learned something new about butterflies and moths. So now we have been having lots of conversations about the legacy of the project, and we will soon be launching our Butterfly Conservation Community Connectors programme that Steve mentioned. So the idea is that this will be a regional ambassador network focused on building an engagement legacy. So we'll be recruiting some of our key partners from different kind of areas across London, and it will be mainly conservation professionals or particularly involved individuals, and it will be a way for them to incorporate butterflies and moths into the work that they're already doing within their communities. And we want to encourage continued butterfly and moth engagement activities in London, whether that be butterfly walks or taking part in the Big Butterfly Count, or setting up a wild space. And we'll be providing resource packs, training opportunities, and sharing sessions to support that work continuing. So if you want to kind of keep up to date on what the community connectors get up to, do make sure you're signed up to the Big City Butterflies e-newsletter, as that will continue. So that's it from me. Do make sure that you're following Big City Butterflies on X or Twitter and Instagram. And thank you, of course, again to our funders, the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So what I'll do now is I will stop sharing my screen and I will stop recording, and then Steve and I will take any questions that you might have.